Our plenary speakers, Mrs. Pascale Mompoint-Gaillard and Dr. Ildikó Lázár, are coming from Learn2Change, an NGO organization. Mrs. Pascale Mompoint-Gaillard is a social psychologist who has specialized in community leadership, diversity education, and education for democracy. She has been involved for 15 years in teacher education for change, focusing on competences for a democratic culture, and being an author of many works of the Council of Europe. Dr. Ildikó Lázár is a senior lecturer at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, offering courses on English language, teaching methodology, cultural studies, and intercultural communication. She has also worked as a researcher, materials writer, and a facilitator in many Council of Europe, Comenius, and Erasmus projects. Mrs. Mompoint-Gaillard and Dr. Lázár, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ifi, and I thank all the speakers who have introduced this conference so well. We feel at home. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm very happy today to present with my dearest colleague, Ildikó. I will be starting and then Ildikó will be continuing. Since our topic is student and teacher well-being, I will be talking about student well-being, and then Ildikó will be following up with teacher well-being. This keynote orients our attention towards student well-being as well as teacher well-being. It answers several questions. What type of uncertainty are students faced with today? And how do students react to present-day uncertainty? What does this mean for learning in online context? And what can be done to help with the situation to increase student well-being and teacher well-being? The illustrations, some of the illustrations out from this presentation have been offered by Laureen Golden, and we thank her very much. So uncertainty has been around for a while. Our world is in transition concerning economy, resources, climate, as we have heard from our speakers before us. But the present uncertainty is of another scope, and it has consequences. For example, today, the number of patients in psychiatry who are between the ages 20 and 30 has doubled since the first lockdown in 2020. Today, youth are missing essential elements and resources that help them develop. They are stunted in their professional construction and the capacity to project themselves into the future. They're lacking social interaction. They're experiencing changing learning environments, and their freedoms are now scarce. In the context of the pandemic, for example, the most vulnerable are elderly people, yes, but youth are the most impacted while they are the least fragile. It's a generational disaster in the making, and we're breaking the construction of a generation, the confidence in life of youth from an entire generation. This is really unprecedented. So the question of mental health and troubles with students' well-being is noteworthy. Some may say, well, this is just for a year or two. Yes, but a year for a young person is not the same as a year for a grown-up. In terms of mental health, the most fragile were the first impacted. Fragile youth, anxious, isolated, fearing failure, having low self-confidence, for example. These youth fall off the cliff. They can drop into anxiety and depression. Those who were solid before and were in favorable conditions for their construction, they can plow through with less visible short-term impact. But what about the long term? Youth gain and integrate self-confidence from relations and experiences, and opportunities for these are lacking today. Mental health is related to developmental issues that concern all ages in different ways. When we look at this slide, for example, and I see this little girl in front of the computer, I do wonder, is that the best place for her? Is it the best way to learn? Psychology of learning shows that some years are important, meaning they're very specific windows of development. For example, from age 3 to 5, the age of this little girl, we need to meet people to learn to speak, to recognize our emotions and others' emotions. For older youth, neuroplasticity is key. The brain is developing until age 25, And today, these brains are getting scars due to the lack of confidence that is impacting their natural growth. Stunted growth is what we may observe in this case. There are different possible reactions to overwhelm and uncertainty. The fear of the unknown is possibly the most fundamental fear of human beings. From an evolutionary perspective, humans have been able to survive because we're able to plan. We've socialized from childhood to believe that there's a predictable universe out there and an order in which things should happen. Our brain doesn't like uncertainty. It is very binary. It likes yes and no. It likes security, not security, good, bad. It classifies things this way. When one is bombarded with uncertainty, we have to think new questions. For example, if I go see my grandmother, will she be safe? Can I finish my studies? Will my diploma be worthless? Can I still meet someone to love? Psychology of uncertainty teaches us that uncertainty can cause us tremendous anxiety because our brain is constantly updating information about the world, making judgments about what's safe and what is not. First, due to its disdain for uncertainty, it makes up all sorts of stories hundreds of times a day, many of them unverified, because to the mind, uncertainty equals danger. And I think we can report this to these theories that we see that people are starting to believe in this context. If our brain doesn't know what's around the corner, it can't keep us out of harm's way. Secondly, our brain also tends to assume the worst. It over-personalizes threats and jumps to conclusions. It will do almost anything it takes for the sake of certainty. Third, we are hardwired to overestimate threats and underestimate our ability to handle them. These three mechanisms are there in the name of survival in an attempt to spur us to action and to get us to safety. Waiting for certainty can feel like torture. The brain prefers to know an outcome, even a negative outcome, rather than to not know. For example, scientists have found that one prefers to lose their job rather to not know what is going to happen with a job. So there's a risk of intolerance to uncertainty today for youth. When we're faced with an uncertainty that is overwhelming for us, uncertainty and complexity that we can't cope with, this creates an aversion that produces anxiety. This has been modelized in psychology. When we're confronted with uncertainty, we can react in two ways, mainly either augment tolerance to uncertainty, which is very liberating work, but hard work that not all of us can have access to, or to diminish uncertainty in our everyday living. Here, we may stop and do nothing, for example. To be sure I don't contaminate, I see no one. I have fear of failing. To be sure I don't fail, I will stop before trying. I will do nothing. Thus, inhibition, avoidance, and anxiety are the problem. Revolt or acceptance, and sometimes both. You need revolt as a part youth need revolt as a part of their identity construction. Revolt is understandable since what is happening today goes beyond the acceptable for them. Facing uncertainty, there are two general categories of youth reactions: resignation, indignation, and a mix of both, either alternating or cyclical. So which is best? It depends. We need all sorts of people to have a diverse society. Anger, frustration, indignation are good starters, but they might not lead to constructive responses. Those who accept, who are calm, who don't get angry, but look at solutions, are also necessary, useful people. But some people need to be able to react, to get angry. They do the job of alerting us, but they must be associated with others who may be able to stay peaceful and maybe who are more fatalistic. Fatalistic individuals know deeply that there are some things that I cannot control and I must accept them. Accepting is not suffering or submission, nor does it mean to do nothing or staying passive. It's about saying, well, today it's raining. I wanted it to be sunny, but that's all right. I can always do something different in the situation I'm in. Acceptation is an appeasement on the inside to better move to action on the outside. And these skills of acceptation are precious today, but they're not all. They don't exclude pushes to resist, revolt. Even these are healthy reactions at times. So what do youth need for their well-being that is amiss? And what can they keep in their everyday life? They need action and relationships. For example, in terms of action, humans need to socialize to be well. And we know that these are nourishments that we need. So our question today is, what can I keep in my daily life to stay healthy? When we are in depression and anxiety, we think efforts are not worth it. Things won't change. So taking this very seriously is important to find the creativity to address these issues at all times. Things we can keep are sports, for example, physical education, activity. We know that children today have less physical activity that they had. And also reading is so important. It's a way to get muscling our brain and really training our empathy, getting into new situations, imagination, for example. So these are actions that can be kept, and also small scale sociability. So this is the idea that it is possible to keep small bubbles in which we can have these relationships that continue and nourish us on a day-to-day basis. This photo, you might have seen it already on the news. It shows something important for us. This is Joe Biden addressing his new staff. And the photo is important because it makes us reflect on how we need to develop new competences for the future and how to be human in online spaces. This is exactly the challenge that we are having also in education in online settings. How to develop new skills for collaboration and conversation. Did we see this when we spoke about 21st century skills 10 years ago? I wonder. And our generation grew up mostly thinking that progress will save, that things are going to be always better. There was a linearity that we were expecting. Tomorrow will be better than yesterday was what we were thinking. Our thoughts about the future determine in great ways where we focus our attention in the present, and that's where it's important. There was certainty and linearity that could be counted on and would not disappear or let us down. Now we see a new rapport to the future being born. What is happening is that not only can youth not have this confidence and conviction, but they have the opposite conviction that tomorrow may be worse than today. That the previous generation was lucky people and that they got the short end of the stick. This has been the model, the linearity for most Western developed countries in Europe and the Americas for the past 50 years. But this is a terrible heritage we are giving them. The climate, the ecology, the battered planet, and now breaking the society they are able to grow in. This needs to be understood by all stakeholders so that future management and policy related to such crisis is not dealt with in the same way it has been dealt with. What can we do better? The decisions about how to deal with the pandemic is done by adults only. This should not be the case. Society should decide in the dilemma between older people and the young, between protection to live and desire to live. Can these be seen together? If and when it starts again, can we do something different? I think student participation in decision is possible, not to decide in authoritarian ways. So talking about well-being and mental health very seriously is important. Consulting youth in decision-making for pandemic policies. Most can manage reasonable sociabilities, for example, so we can try to trust them. Democratic issues in online learning are part of all this complex issue. Lots of it emerges as good sense, actually, when you're looking at what's happening. We think that living online and living in presence is completely different, but actually lots of the same principles apply to both. We just forget that. For example, equal access is the most talked about issue in education. Discrimination has been revealed under a new light. We've seen students disappear, the fragile ones I was talking about before. And this can be alleviated. I've seen teachers, for example, who put their work on web pages so that it's accessible at all times by families. Also using the phone, mail. I've also had news from teachers who actually go outside to meet their students in safe conditions and to be able to see them, talk to them, and help them. So scheduling, for example, is another issue. Adults tend to dislike meetings and sessions online that are more than 2.5 hours, but to regularly impose 8 hours of online teaching a day to youth, this is something we need to think about. Online behavior and its interpretations are also another aspect that is important for democratic issues in education. For example, asking students to turn their camera on. I understand this ask, but maybe they don't like to show how their interior is and the conditions in which they're living. There's also this question of controlling attention. For example, some who are shy will not want to have their cameras, will not also feel very comfortable to intervene. But this doesn't mean that they are not engaged and don't want to do good. So always believe students are capable of the best. That is an advice I think that is helpful here. And the last point is assessment. I've seen, for example, widespread practices, mostly in universities, but I've seen it also in secondary schools where teachers are using proctoring. Is that a democratic practice? So what is proctoring? It's a software that is put on your computer and it will spy everything that you're doing to make sure that you're not cheating at an exam. It'll also surveil what is around you, the room, etc. This poses real questions of privacy, right to privacy. And so I put this in the issues, democratic issues linked to human rights. Also the question of overload. We're overdoing by fear of underdoing or by reaction to lack of control. We're compensating by our practice. And this is compounded by pressures in schools that want their diploma to be recognized as valid. So teams and groups and groups that are working online, either for exams or in the normal course of their studies, are also experiencing democratic issues within the groups. It's not because you just put a bunch of students together to work that you actually are sure that everyone is sharing and collaborating there. We don't know who is free writing, working with people you don't know, and how you're sanctioned for your behavior or for others' behavior. So these are really democratic issues at the center. We could think about whether this situation we are in are going to help us for the future. Are we going to be able to put the human at the center? And some people want things to go back as they were, while others want this to be a turning point, a tipping point, so that nothing remains the same as before. Perhaps they will never be the same as before. There's a good chance that new things will emerge. And the present situation has revealed weak spots in our democratic societies that might appear less democratic than we thought. Egoistic, individualistic, consumerist pitfalls are evident in our dispositions, and discrimination is revealed under a new light. Perhaps a different restart. At the beginning, uncertainty, anxiety, anger, frustration may all be transformed in energy and intelligence, and then reflection and rethinking. So this is what I wanted to present to you for student well-being and the question of how uncertainty today affects our well-being. And now I would like to propose that you, if you have questions, that you put them in the chat, and Learn to Change facilitators who are here with us today will kindly take these questions and send them back to us so that we can take them up at the end for our discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and to allow Ildikó to now start. Good luck, Ildikó.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all the speakers for the warm welcome and the interesting introductions. I have to say that I feel a bit overwhelmed myself. I mean, there was so much about policy reforms, learning how to learn, using ICT, change and change and change, and teachers having to adapt to change and the changing circumstances. So I think it's not a bad idea to talk about teacher well-being. How are we all handling all this? Okay, so these are the 5 things that I would like to talk about briefly. So how are we teachers doing these days? What types of uncertainty and risks are we facing? And how do we react to these challenges? Because there are obviously a lot of challenges. And then again, what does this mean for teaching and learning in the online classroom? And what can we do to help ourselves and help each other? So this is the 5 bullet points that I would like to elaborate on a little bit. And I'll start by showing you an infographic from a couple years ago, actually, from an Australian website that I like very much and you might want to consult. It's called Teacher Wellbeing. And as I said, this infographic was prepared before the pandemic, and it examines the causes of teacher stress. So lots of demands and expectations, increased workload, there's always something new to learn, accountability or responsibility, right? So lots of things that we have to keep an eye on and feel responsible for. Very often we are perfectionists. We want to do better and better and better. Many of us lack social emotional learning. We don't have this in our teacher training curricula, most of us. So this is also something that's missing. And there are a lot of administrative requirements most of the time. So this was before the pandemic. And now, if we move on, there's a lot of other things, right? So we are trying now to use offline activities and techniques in online spaces. We're trying to adapt everything that we do, or we used to do in the classroom, into a Zoom space or a Moodle platform or any other online space. And of course, these new online tools are very helpful, and we managed to learn how to use them. But this is also a lot of energy. This is also a lot of effort to use these tools and apps. And then there are the students who are unwell, but we can't see them too closely through the screen. It's not so easy to spot who's unwell. There are students who hide. There are students who disappear. There are students who behave completely differently from what we are used to from them. And then there are parents. There are parents who worry, of course. But there are also parents who always know better. And we have to have all sorts of discussions and negotiations with them to prove that what we want to do is something that's worthy of doing. And then there are colleagues. We have to help some of our colleagues who are doing even worse than we do. We have to do something with the colleagues who don't seem to be concerned at all, who neglect their job, or maybe they are so unwell that they just cannot function anymore in the online space. And then this last thing on this list is our ideas about democratic and inclusive classes. How do we do all this? I mean, we would like to be democratic, we would like to be inclusive, we would like to use differentiated instruction. We want to do everything, basically. We want to do our best. but it's very difficult to do our best in such difficult circumstances, right? So this is also an additional source of difficulty for most of us. And then further risks and challenges that we face today due to the pandemic. Many teachers fall ill. And of course, it's very difficult because especially if we have colleagues who are ill, then we worry about them and we also substitute for them. We also have to help their students. So we are at the point of exhaustion. Very often we feel isolated. Of course, just like our students, as Pascale said, many of us are anxious because of all these changes, because of all these difficulties and challenges. And some fall into depression, and some teachers give up because they burn out completely. So there are lots of difficulties that teachers face these days. But if you look at it, if you look at all your colleagues, for example, then you always notice that some shine. Some of them really enjoy. I don't know where to put the little. Sorry. So some of them are having a good time. They are really good at using online tools. They know how to organize everything. They don't mind. It's not so bad. You don't have to commute. You can teach from home. There's perhaps fewer classes that you have to teach because the students should not be exposed to 7 or 8 hours of looking at the screen. So some seem to sort of enjoy this new mode. And then some others manage. They get along. It's okay. You always learn something new. Maybe some of your classes are not so great, but then there are some others that are okay, so you are happy. And then some of us swing between extremes. So we say, "Oh, this was really good. Oh, I can't do this." So you are really uncertain about a lot of things. But then again, every now and then you have some successful moments. And then others struggle really bad. Other teachers have a very hard time learning how to teach online and how to keep their social interactions online. And some, at least in my country, give up and say that this is not for them. They can't do this anymore. This is too much. So why is this? Perhaps many of you know the Kubler-Ross change curve. This is quite old. I think it's from the 1960s or 70s, and I still think it's a very useful tool for us to understand the emotional response to change, especially to big changes like what we are living through these days. So first we were shocked. I don't know how it happened in Cyprus, but in my country, in Hungary, for example, last spring, teachers had a weekend to switch to online teaching. 1 weekend. And they had to start, the news came Friday nights that we are going online. And Monday morning, they had to hold their lessons online. And many, of course, had not been prepared for this. So they had no idea how to do this. So obviously, first there was shock and denial. And then trying, there was a lot of frustration. Many fell into the ditch and had a very bad mood, got even depressed. And then luckily, most of us started experimenting, started playing around with these new tricks, online tricks, and also, but not only the tools, also how to do it, what methods, what techniques, what strategies, how to keep in touch. So we started experimenting. We made a couple decisions. Most of us consulted our students, I think, to negotiate how to go about online teaching and learning. And many of us managed to integrate the changes, and we feel that we can manage. We are okay. Sometimes it's actually a lot of fun. But many of us actually take a much longer time to reach this point. So it doesn't go so fast for everyone. The situation, the lockdown has been on for about a year or nearly a year in my country, and I think in most countries. So some teachers are still at the frustration stage, and some are still at the beginning phases of the experimenting stage. So this is something to keep in mind when we look at our colleagues, when we talk to them. So what can we do to help ourselves and to help each other? Well, it depends on what we need. Well, and it depends on where we are on this curve. So if we feel that we lack knowledge, then we have to go for training or conferences or workshops online, of course. And we can read up. We have the time now, perhaps more than before, to read up on things where we feel that we are missing knowledge. But if we are not sure about our goals, if the goals are unclear, then we might ask for coaching. And if it's the skills that we miss, if we think that there are skills that we are missing, then we need mentoring, perhaps from a colleague who has those skills. And if we have lots of negative emotions, then counseling. And that's also very important. We shouldn't neglect those emotions. They are very important and decide about a lot of things in our life. And if we feel extreme fatigue, which is very common, I think, then we need to rest, relax, sleep, and go out a lot and take photos of nature, for example. So, what else can we do to help ourselves and to help each other? You know this saying, put on your own oxygen mask before trying to help others. I think this is very important. So we can't help our students if we are not feeling well. We first have to be able to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and stand on our feet and be strong and rested, and then we can help our students. And there are little things, and I think this is common sense. So this bullet point list of things is something that we all know, but still there's so much work to do that we tend to forget how important these are. So we do need to have proper coffee and tea breaks between lessons, just like at school. So leave the computer, go out, grab a cup, maybe go outside for 5 minutes. This can make a huge difference. Same thing with music or creative home projects, yoga, meditation, but especially working out and going for long walks or a run every day. This is very, very useful for the brain, and it's very useful for our mood. This can help tremendously. And we have to be able to preserve our relationships with our friends and colleagues. And most of it has to be done online. But that's okay. That's a lot more than nothing. So we need to have those Skype and Zoom and other online chat sessions with our colleagues and friends. And then reading up, as I said earlier, on good online solutions to everyday classroom activities. It's amazing what you can find on the internet. So you have a question, you Google, and you have 10 answers, and you select 2, and you're done. You have the answer, and maybe your lessons the next day will go much more smoothly. And then maybe the quality and the quantity of what you teach and what you test is not as important as everything else. And I know this is very difficult to sort of change perspectives and look at things from a new angle. But is it really the quality and the quantity that matters? It's really a lot more the atmosphere and how people feel. I mean, we heard Pascale talk about students who are anxious, students who are inhibited, students who feel completely isolated and left out. I think it's a lot more important to make sure that they are having a good time, that they have ears, that they have someone who listens to them and who they can talk to. It's much more important than whether we have finished lesson 4 in the book today or not. And yeah, the last point here, I mean, sometimes we feel that students disappear, they don't turn on the camera, they don't care, but maybe that's not the reason. Maybe they're just not feeling well. So it might be a good idea to reach out to them, to send them a message, to call them, to ask how they are. And maybe then if you know, if you can do this, then perhaps they will be more ready to turn on the camera. And if you manage to hold lessons where they are actually asked for their opinion, their experience, their views, their questions, then maybe they will be more willing to participate actively. I have to tell you a very short story about my daughter's history teacher who was having a very hard time with these online lessons. Um, and it's a class of 11th graders, so they are big girls and boys. Nobody turned on their camera, of course. They didn't want the teacher to see them, or they didn't want their peers to see them with their room in the background. Lack of makeup, you know, no good hairdo. It's no, you don't want to be seen. But the teacher was so sad that one day that she burst out in tears and she said, I am really having a hard time. I cannot teach like this. I would love to see you and I would love to talk to you. Uh, and she asked for the student's advice. And the student said, well, if you would like us to turn on the camera and that would make you feel better, then we will. It's okay. And since then, they have had their camera on. They have real discussions online in Zoom, and everything's going well. It's just that the teacher had to once be, you know, open about her feelings and about what a difficult time she was having. So there might be solutions to all the problems. It's just sometimes we don't take the initiative and we don't speak up about uh, what worries us or what makes teaching difficult for us. I would like to show you one more site that I find very useful. And I think it would be really good to for you to check it out. There's a survey called PERMA survey, which helps you see whether how you are doing in terms of teacher well-being. So it's called PERMA because it's about positive emotions, engagement, to check how engaged you are with people, activities, and so on. Relationships, whether you are happy, satisfied with your relationships. Meaning, whether you see the meaning in the things that you do, whether you feel accomplished, and what you do for your health. So this is a great tool, I think, and it's free. So I do recommend that you try it out, and maybe it will give you more ideas about what to do for your own well-being. I am looking at the clock. Sorry. Yeah. And so what does all this mean for online teaching and learning? Obviously, first of all, it means that less is more, because we can't possibly teach as much and as easily in the online world as we used to in the classroom, when we could all see each other and move and go out for physical education and then have a music class and then together play games in the English class. So we have to reduce it. Also, we have to reduce the amount of material, because it's very tiring for students and for us to look at the screen for long hours every day. And as I suggested earlier, we should let go of traditional teaching and tests. I think if we realize, especially assessment is a difficult issue, if we realize that the aim of assessment is to promote learning, and if this is the most important aim, then why would we worry about open book exams or tests? Or why do we need to stress our students and ourselves by the proctoring gadgets, for example, that Pascale mentioned. They can create the tests themselves, and if they design the tests, then they will learn the material. That's as simple as that. They can do research. The students can come with little presentations depending on their age and the subject matter. They can do an awful lot of things, and they really like to be sort of responsible for their own learning as soon as we teach them that this is something fun, and this is something useful, and this is something that that they can do. So that this will give them a lot of self-confidence. And the fact that this shows that you trust them will also be very motivating. And then socializing online, which I mentioned earlier already. So it's important to have classes where we just have conversations. We just talk, we just discuss the issues. If someone's unwell, then we try to help them. And then if you take a look at this little infographic on the right, this is something that we put together with Learn to Change. And this seemed to be a very useful tool for the teachers that we have been working with. And the 5 S's that you can see is for slow. So go slow, take care, don't rush, keep it simple. That's the second S. Try to keep it short and simple, and do activities that can be done online, but make sure that everyone's with you so no one's left behind, so they all understand, because it's simple enough. Should be structured, so it should be clear what the plan is and what the outcomes are. You should be supportive, of course, so try to help as much as possible. And try to make sense of the material. Try to make sure that it's easy to see why this is relevant for the students, what it is that it helps them with in real life. That can make a huge difference. So I do recommend, again, checking out the Learn to Change website if you would like to find out more. And I would like to talk to you a little bit about an activity that helped me and my well-being in the past few years. And this is creating and maintaining a community of practice with teachers. We call this the Pestalozzi Fridays because they originate from the Pestalozzi program of the Council of Europe. And they are Fridays because we hold them once a month on Fridays. And this is a free learning by doing professional development workshop for teachers for happy schools in my town in Budapest. We've been doing this for 8 years and we have really been enjoying it tremendously. So this is open to all teachers of all subjects and types of school from all over the town or the country actually. And we usually have 40 to 50 regulars. So teachers who come every month. And this is organized and facilitated by a team on a voluntary basis. So we are doing this for free. I mean, me and the team members, and the teachers can participate for free. So there's no money involved, which is, I think, a great thing. And this is usually, or this used to be, in a secondary school downtown in Budapest. And since last year, of course, we are organizing these Pestalozzi Fridays online in Zoom. And this is, the goals are, of course, to help teachers' professional development for happy schools and to try out and reflect on methods, techniques, our problems, our challenges, and to be able to hear others' opinions, to share worries and concerns, but also success stories. Basically to maintain a supportive community of practice of teachers who can always help each other, who are always there to exchange ideas and experiences. And our most important topics are intercultural communication, inclusive education, cooperative learning, participatory class management, nonviolent communication, formative assessment, and most recently, quite often, of course, online teaching and learning. And this is a nice little community. I included some pictures here for you to see what it was like while we were still in the face-to-face stage. We try things out, basically. So we try out activities like role plays and opinion line, speed dating, cooperative group work, all sorts of things. And we discuss their adaptation to the classroom. And this is really a great way to actually generate energy. So we feel that even if it's on a Friday afternoon and everyone arrives tired, exhausted after a week's work, we very often feel that people are more energized in the evening after the Pestalozzi Friday. So if you can create a little community like this, then I think this is something very useful. It can really be very supportive and can give you energies. So again, some sample activities, and then this Zoom picture from last week when we held our Pestalozzi Friday in Zoom and tried out 2 very interesting activities that can be adapted to the classroom in Zoom or other video sessions. So we always leave with lots of new ideas, and we always leave with the feeling that we belong, that we get support, we get help, and it's a really good thing to do. And you don't have to be 50. You don't have to be, you don't have to have a community of 50 teachers. It can be 3 teachers, 5 teachers, maybe 10, getting together to exchange ideas and experiences, and helping each other can be a great process. So this leads us to something similar to the Pestalozzi Fridays. It's the 3 web labs that we are planning in the next few months. So I would like to give the floor back to Pascale to tell us what to expect.
Okay, I can speak and you can keep your slides on. Okay, great. Yeah. Thanks to the Teachers for Europe program, we're able to have a follow-up of this event, the winter school. Unfortunately, we're not able to go to beautiful Cyprus, and we hope still to go to Malta, but we're not sure. We were able to reallocate some of our effort towards more online encounters, and that's how we're able to announce today that in March, April, and May, we will have 3 web labs that are conversation-based. We've been telling you a lot. It's connection, human-centered ways of being together. That's exactly what we'll focus on, and we'll be thinking about multilingualism, education for democracy, and online learning, but through conversation-based and if you're methods. And if you're interested, you can pre-register by using the link that I'm going to put in the chat for you. Do I have access to the chat? Yes, I do. I'll put it in the chat for you right now. Ildikó, do you want me to continue, or are you doing the last slide? Yes. Let me put this in the chat before. There, everyone has it. And then okay, great. So yes, I wanted to thank you for listening to Ildikó and me. I think it was very interesting working together on this issue of student and teacher well-being, and also seeing how the well-being of one also nourishes the well-being of the other. They go together. So that was an important way of seeing the topic. And the very last information I'm going to share is, thank you, that we finally have been able to publish the tool that we offer for free, which is Cards for Democracy, and they are now available in 31 languages, mostly European languages, but also we have our educators in Israel who have translated them in Hebrew and Arabic. There's a group working on dialogue, intercultural dialogue there, that wants to use the cards. So we're very happy to have these 30 languages, and we'll be rolling them out little by little starting March. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
You want to?
It's Sophia now. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
okay,
you,
Sophia.
Pascale and Ildikó, for your very thoughtful presentation. As our participating teachers stated in the chat, it was excellent and to the point.